Hi everybody, I'm Jordan from TakeLessons.com, and in this video we are talking about key signatures and time signatures. In key signatures, it's an extension of what we covered in our other video about the notes on the staff and how that translates to our musical alphabet and how that translates to the notes on the keyboard. In talking about time signatures, we're really just trying to set up a foundation for another video that we have that focuses only on understanding rhythm. The first thing we need to look at if we're going to understand key signatures is the sharps and flats. So those are two terms we need to understand. Now sharps look like this, the number sign, now better known as the hashtag. And flats look like a lowercase b or a 6. We want to be careful because it is similar to that. But as you'll see on each black key here, there are two names for each one. There's D sharp and E flat. You'll notice that's between D and E. F sharp and G flat, between F and G, and so on. Moving on and on. Now, the basic general rule is that whenever you have a note, let's say take C, C sharp is the note that is one note up to the right. And whenever you have a flat, take D flat for example, that means we're going from D one note to the left. So if you remember, low notes to the left, high notes to the right. The sharp means we're going up in pitch by 1/2 step. That's 1/2 step. And flat means we're going down in pitch by 1/2 step. Now just a note, it doesn't matter, in this case it doesn't matter whether it's a white key or black key. In other words, a B sharp would still fall here on the C key. Even though it's a white key, it's this up to the next key to the right, no matter what color it is. Same here, C flat technically falls right there. Now, the word for these, like you might be a little confused, wondering why are there two names for one note? Well, I won't get much into why, but I will tell you that the term for that, same note, different names, is called enharmonic. And again, we won't really get into the why. It depends on what key you're in. It depends on several factors. But for now, just know that that's kind of how it is. If you get an F sharp or a G flat, it means to play the same note. Same here, an E sharp is going to be the same as an F. An F flat will be the same as an E. Sharps go to the right, one key. Flats go to the left. So let's apply some of this. And there's a phrase that I'll use because we're really trying to draw together three factors. And that is, what does it look like on the staff? What is the spelling of the note, as in what is the letter A, B, C, F sharp, whatever. And then, how does that translate to the keyboard? So staff, spelling, and then keyboard. That's going to be an important element here. So for now, let's focus on the spelling and look at some different notes here. So let's look at our treble clef and kind of put some of these sharps and flats in action. So let's start down here on middle C. This is the notation for middle C. One ledger line, meaning we add an extra line below the staff. And that note corresponds, we'll say, to this C on the graph, which is C4, or the fourth C up. So from here, we can do a couple of things to this. We can add a sharp or a flat. And if we add a sharp, for example, it's on the C line, so it's a C, and it's a sharp, so we call it C sharp. You'll notice, call it C sharp on the staff, though we put the sharps before the note. Same here, we can go to D flat. Here's a step above C, so we call that D. And if we place the flat sign before it, we have a D flat. Now, again, we have the staff, where it falls here, what line or space it's on. We have the spelling, and then we need to know that this corresponds to a key over here on the piano. So in this case, we would play this black key if we see any note, not just this happens to be a whole note. Again, we're going to get into rhythm later. But whatever symbol is on that line, we play this key. Let's have a quick quiz on the sharps and flats. First of all, I will draw a note on the staff, name that note. So here's our treble clef, telling us where our G line is. So name these notes. So this is on the fourth line, so it's a D. It's got a flat sign next to it, so it's a D flat. This has got on the F line with a sharp, it's an F sharp. This is a C with a flat. And this, you might find interesting, even though it's on a space over here, this is also an F, and it has a sharp sign. Okay, now let's quiz the other way around. So I will write out the spelling and then draw in on the staff where the note would be. So let's say so for G, we first need the G line. Go ahead and circle it, the line going through, and the sharp sign goes before it. Now you could also put one right on top of the staff. That also counts as G sharp. Here is A flat. Here's B flat. And here's D sharp. So, assuming you understand how the sharps and flats work, we can now talk about key signatures. In addition to the staff paper and a chart of the keyboard with the notes labeled, I also have with me a chart of what is called the circle of fifths, and it also has with it all the different key signatures that you come across in music. So this is going to be very, very useful. We won't go over all of these, but we're just going to cover a few of the basic ones that are kind of near the top half here. So first key signature we want to look at is the key of C. Now typically in music you will find the key signature placed right between the clef and the time signature. Now we're going to talk about the time signature in a second here, but 4/4 is a very, very common time signature. In fact, it's so common sometimes you'll just see it written as a C for common time. But you will, we have the clef, we have the time signature. You'll only see one of these, but right in here is where you will find the key signature. Now, for the key of C, you might notice over here on my chart there are no sharps and flats. And the reason for that is the key of C is all white keys, meaning that if you play right up these notes, you'll get a major scale, the C major scale. Now, to really understand keys, let's jump into the key of G, which is our first sharp key. Now, again, there's many directions that we could take this discussion. Well, what's the circle of fifths? Wait, what are the minor keys? You know, what are enharmonic keys? You know, there's so many directions we can take this in. But again, I'm trying to really, you know, since we're so limited on time, I really want to keep the focus on from a practical standpoint, when you see music on the staff, what button do you push? What key do you push? Like, there's a whole world of music theory that is quite fascinating. But in this scenario, we really just don't have time to cover quite all that. So from a practical perspective, I'm mostly just focusing on the sharps and the flats on the staff, and then what letter that corresponds to. There's some other things going on here that we could talk about, but for now, that's pretty much all we want to know, is that G, you'll see one sharp, D, you'll notice two sharps, and so on. So we're going to get into that. So key of C looks like this. Meaning there are no sharps or flats in the key signature. And so that would mean if you put a note on any line or space, it's going to be a natural, meaning a white key. So let's get on into our first sharp key, which is the key of G. Now the key of G has one sharp. And what this means is that all of the Fs, because this sharp is placed on the F line, all of the Fs are F sharp, meaning one key up to the right, instead of the white key here. Now, if you go to the key of D, there are two sharps in the key of D. And you will find those sharps to be F sharp and C sharp. And of course, that'll be placed between the clef and the key time signature, excuse me. Now again, we could ask many questions. Well, why does G have one sharp? Why does D have two sharps? But that really is a subject for another video or another class. So what we want to focus on from a practical standpoint, what does that mean? What keys do we push when it looks like this? All right, let's move on into the flat keys. So the flat keys, starting with the key of F. And you'll notice last time we were coming around this way, adding sharps. This time we're going to come around to the left of the circle and add flats. So let's add our first flat, which is a B flat. So let's do the same drill from F to F. Start our musical alphabet. Oops, that's E. That would be F. And right there in the middle, oh, I'm sorry, that should be a flat sign for B flat. Our next key will actually be B flat. And that has two flats, one on the B flat, middle B flat line, and the next one on the E space. Let's spell that one out. Now notice the difference there. This one has the line going through it. This one is above the first line on a space. So if we spell out our alphabet, C, D, E, F, G, B. Here are our flats. Let's do two more of these. We have E flat. With three flats. So, these are three of the flat keys. And again, the process that I used for all of this was the staff. We want to make sure we understand what the notes on the staff are and where the flats are. We want to be able to spell it. We need to know what letter each of these notes mean with the key signature. And then we need to be able to find it on the keyboard. And if we can do that, we got a good start on any tune. So moving on into time signatures. So first of all, what do time signatures look like? You will find them on the staff after the clef and after the key signature. You'll see two numbers stacked one on top of each other inside the staff. So for example, we have the key of G, which means F sharps in the bass and treble clef. We have a 4 on top of a 4, and this is telling us in this video we won't cover how to perform these rhythms, but this will tell us what the music is going to look like, how it's organized visually, how we're grouping notes. So in this case we have two numbers. The top number is telling us the number of beats per measure, or the number of counts. So in this case we have 4 counts per measure. Now the bottom number is telling us what is a beat. So we have several numbers here. The number 1 would represent a whole note, which looks like an open circle. The number 2 for a half note, and that is open circle with a stem. Number 4, the quarter note, which we're covering here, is the closed circle with a stem. And 8 for an eighth note, which is like a quarter note, but with a flag here. Now, it's important to note that the half note is half the value of a whole note. A quarter note is half the value of a half note, and an eighth note is half the value of a quarter note. So the fractions do apply to these values. So what we have here, the top number again, beats per measure. And what is a beat? This means we have 4 quarter notes per measure. So again, if I draw 4 closed dots plus the stems, this is a very typical rhythm that you would see in 4/4 time. Now, this doesn't mean we're limited to quarter notes. We're welcome to use all of them as long as we pay attention to those values and that it all adds up to the equivalent of 4 quarter notes. So 2 half notes is perfectly fine. Now there are other variations where we use quarter notes for counting beats. One of them would be 2/4 time, meaning we have 2 quarter notes. So here's 2 quarter notes. 1 half note also does the trick. Here we have 3/4 time. So a half note which is worth 2 plus a quarter note worth 1, and we've got our 3 beats. Down here, 3 quarter notes. So really common, I shouldn't use the word common, but typical rhythms that you'll see. And the reason I want to be careful with the word with the word common is that 4/4 time is also used so widely that sometimes you'll just see a C for common time instead of 4/4. So you'll usually see a 4 in the bottom. Sometimes you will see an 8 in the bottom. Now the top number will be all kinds of stuff. Usually 4, but 2, 3, 6, 7, 9, 11, 13. The top number can be basically anything. The bottom number will usually be a 4 or an 8. Now the 8 meaning we're counting in eighth notes. So in the case of 6/8, for example, we would have 6 eighth notes per measure. Now usually instead of drawing flags for each of them, when you have multiple eighth notes, we beam them together. So this means the same thing. It looks different, but it would sound exactly the same. 3/8 is also an acceptable time signature. 5/8 or 7/8 is also something you might come across. But usually a 4 or an 8. Sometimes you'll see what's called cut time, where you'll have a 2 in the bottom, basically meaning 2 half notes per measure. But again, what you will mostly see is 4/4 time, otherwise known as common time, and this will be the rhythm that we start off with when we work on actually performing music and performing this. This will give you a good idea of what to expect, at least visually, how it should look within every measure. So that wraps up our video on key signatures and time signatures. Thank you so much for joining us.